The asphalt shimmered, a living, breathing beast under the unyielding gaze of the Phoenix Sunday. It was 4:47 p.m. on the second Tuesday of August, and the city was a crucible, forging heatstroke victims out of the unwary. Sarah Jenkins felt the oppressive weight of it, even through the thick soles of her nursing clogs. Her scrubs, once crisp at 4 a.m., now clung to her like a second skin, damp with the effort of surviving another grueling 12-hour shift. Clarity Health Medical Center, a gleaming monument to corporate healthcare, loomed behind her. Its polished glass facade reflected the brutal sky, offering no solace, only a distorted image of her own exhaustion. At 28, Sarah already felt the weight of years beyond her age. Her youthful idealism, once a bright flame, had been reduced to a flickering ember by a relentless grind of understaffing, overflowing ERs, and the soul-crushing bureaucracy that increasingly prioritized profit margins over patient well-being. She was an ER nurse, a warrior on the front lines. But lately, she felt more like a perpetually drained battery in a system designed to consume. She navigated the crowded sidewalk, her eyes unfocused, a low hum of fatigue reverberating in her skull. All she wanted was her beat-up Honda Civic, a cold shower, and the blissful oblivion of sleep. It was then, just as she passed the periphery of Clarity Health's meticulously manicured, yet strangely unwelcoming, property line, that she saw him. He was a crumpled heap of humanity, tucked into the meager shade cast by a bus stop bench. Not on the bench, but beneath it, as if trying to shrink away from the world. His clothes, once probably military issue, were now faded and tattered, clinging to a wiry frame. A shock of unkempt gray hair framed a face etched with a lifetime of hard living and, Sarah instantly recognized, something else, a deep, pervasive weariness that went beyond physical exhaustion. His skin was alarmingly flushed, dry and cracked around the lips. His breath came in shallow, ragged gasps. People walked by, a steady stream of them, their faces either averted or glazed over with self-absorption. A young couple, heads buried in their phones, navigated around him as if he were an inconvenient obstacle. A woman in a business suit clutched her designer purse tighter, speeding up her pace. He was invisible, a ghost in the brutal sunlight. Sarah's exhaustion evaporated, replaced by a surge of adrenaline. Every instinct, honed by years of emergency medicine, screamed at her. Heatstroke, severe dehydration, possible shock. Her mind raced, ticking off symptoms, assessing severity. He looked to be in his late 50s, maybe early 60s, but the gauntness aged him beyond his years. The haunted look in his eyes, even as they fluttered shut, spoke of trauma that went deeper than the present moment. She knew hospital policy. It was drilled into them relentlessly. Do not engage with individuals off-property. Limit hospital liability. Refer to city services if observed off-campus. Her supervisor, Miss Jenkins, no relation, much to Sarah's relief, had delivered the lecture with an icy precision just last week, recounting a cautionary tale of a nurse who'd given a homeless man a sandwich and ended up in a lawsuit when he later claimed food poisoning. Liability, liability, liability. It was the mantra of Clarity Health, echoing in the sterile hallways. But Sarah couldn't walk away. Her Hippocratic oath, whispered during her pinning ceremony, felt like a sacred vow. Her conscience, still stubbornly alive despite Clarity Health's best efforts, clawed at her. She wouldn't be able to sleep tonight if she left him. She wouldn't be able to look at herself in the mirror. She took a deep breath, the dry air searing her lungs, and changed course. The direct route to her car was forgotten. She moved swiftly, professionally, her internal nurse taking over. Sir, can you hear me?" His eyelids fluttered open, revealing eyes that were a startling, brilliant blue, but clouded with pain and confusion. He tried to speak, but only a dry rasp emerged. "Water." Sarah's heart ached. She reached into her bag, her fingers fumbling past her wallet and keys. She had one unopened bottle of water left from her shift. Her last bit of hydration, saved for the brutal walk to her car. Without a second thought, she twisted off the cap and held it to his lips. He drank. Not sips, but desperate, greedy gulps, the water disappearing as if poured into parched earth. A few drops spilled down his chin, but he didn't care. He finished the entire bottle in a matter of seconds, his Adam's apple bobbing frantically. A shudder went through him, and for a moment he seemed to relax, a faint sigh escaping his lips. "Thank you," he rasped, his voice a little stronger now. "God bless you. We need to get you inside, sir," Sarah said, helping him to sit up. You're severely dehydrated. Do you have any ID? Before the man could answer, a shadow fell over them. Jenkins, what in the ever-loving hell do you think you're doing? It was Frank. Frank Higgins, Clarity Health's head of security, a barrel-chested man with a permanent scowl and a uniform that seemed 2 sizes too small. He strutted over, not with an ounce of concern for the suffering man, but with a proprietary aggression towards Sarah. You are off property, Nurse Jenkins, Frank boomed, his voice a low growl. You know the rules. No fraternizing with transients. You're encouraging vagrancy right outside the hospital entrance. This is a liability. He looked down at the veteran with undisguised contempt. All right, old man, move along. You heard me. Find another bench. Sarah felt a hot flush of anger rise in her. Frank, he's in medical distress. He needs help. I just gave him water. You what? Frank's eyes widened in theatrical horror. You gave him your water? Are you out of your mind? What if he claims you poisoned him? What if he gets sick? Do you know the paperwork that generates? He turned back to the veteran. Get out of here, now! Elias, still weak, tried to push himself up, a flicker of shame in his blue eyes. No. Sarah put a protective hand on his arm. He's not moving. He needs medical attention. She turned to Frank, her voice firm despite the tremor of adrenaline. I'm taking him inside, Frank. I'm bringing him to the ER. You can write me up all you want, but I'm not leaving him out here to die. Frank looked like a bulldog whose chew toy had just talked back. His face reddened. Jenkins, this is a direct violation of policy. I'm reporting this immediately. You are not to bring him onto hospital property. Watch me, Sarah retorted, already helping Elias to his feet, supporting his surprisingly light frame. With every step, she could feel the heat radiating off him. He was a furnace. Come on, sir. We're going to get you some proper medical care, Frank spluttered, fumbling for his radio. This is an unauthorized patient intake. I repeat, unauthorized. His voice crackled over the airwaves. Sarah ignored him. With Elias leaning heavily on her, they slowly made their way towards the gleaming, indifferent doors of Clarity Health, the air conditioning already a blessed relief. She could feel Frank's furious gaze burning into her back, but she didn't look back. She had made her choice. The air inside Clarity Health Medical Center was a stark contrast to the inferno outside. Chilled, sterile, and permeated with the antiseptic scent of hand sanitizer and fear. Yet, Sarah felt no relief. The cool air seemed only to highlight the cold indifference that radiated from the very walls of the institution. She guided Elias, who she now knew by a quick glance at a worn, laminated card in his wallet simply read, Elias Vance, and an old service ID, towards the triage desk. The fluorescent lights hummed, casting harsh shadows that did nothing to soften the weary faces of the waiting patients. Next, a bored voice droned. Brenda, the triage nurse, a woman whose smile seemed to have permanently soured, didn't even look up from her computer screen. Brenda, I have a patient here, Sarah began, trying to sound calm. Severe dehydration, probable heat stroke. He was collapsed outside. Brenda finally lifted her gaze, her eyes narrowing as she recognized Sarah. Jenkins, what's he doing here? Frank just radioed about you bringing in some indigent. She looked Elias up and down with an undisguised sneer, her expression clearly stating her disgust. Elias, sensing the judgment, visibly shrank. He's a patient, Brenda, Sarah insisted, her voice tight. He needs care. He has no insurance, but he's got a service ID. She showed the ID, a faded military card. Brenda scoffed. Oh, a veteran. Wonderful. Another charity case for us. No insurance means he's bottom of the barrel, Jenkins, you know that. Our quotas don't just fill themselves. She grabbed a fresh chart, scribbling, John Doe, homeless, with a flourish, neatly ignoring the name on the ID Sarah had shown her. Vitals? Then he can wait in the hallway. We've got a full house of actual paying customers. Sarah's blood boiled, but she held her tongue. Arguing with Brenda was like arguing with a brick wall, and Elias needed help now. She quickly took his vitals, which were still alarming, but stable enough for the moment. She ensured he was placed on a gurney in a less trafficked corner of the hallway, out of the direct blast of the AC, and made a note for a saline drip. Just a basic saline drip. Nothing else for now, unless Dr. Evans says otherwise, Brenda called out, as if granting a great favor. A few minutes later, Dr. Evans himself, a portly man with thinning hair and an air of perpetual annoyance, shuffled by. He barely glanced at Elias's chart, which was now prominently marked, no insurance. He scoffed audibly. Heat stroke? Another one? Don't they know to stay out of the sun? Just give him the saline. Don't waste valuable resources on these situations. He waved a dismissive hand and continued his rounds without a word to Sarah, or even a glance at Elias. The message was clear. This man's life was not a priority. Sarah's fury was quickly overshadowed by a growing dread. She knew what this meant. Elias would lie there for hours, possibly days, receiving only the most basic care, if that. He was trapped in the cold, uncaring maw of the system, just as she was about to be. The dreaded summons arrived via an urgent page to her personal cell phone, just as she was trying to get a warmer blanket for Elias. Sarah Jenkins, report to Administrator Reed's office immediately. Urgent. The message was terse, devoid of pleasantries. It was a command, not a request. With a heavy heart, Sarah made her way to the executive floor, a hushed realm of plush carpets and hushed voices, far removed from the chaotic urgency of the ER. Miss Evelyn Reed's office was exactly as Sarah imagined, meticulously organized, with a panoramic view of the city, framed by expensive art. Reed herself was a vision of corporate perfection, sleek blonde bob, perfectly tailored suit, and a smile that never quite reached her cold, calculating eyes. She radiated an aura of polite but absolute authority. Nurse Jenkins, Miss Reed began, her voice smooth as polished stone, gesturing to the uncomfortable guest chair opposite her imposing desk. Thank you for coming. There was no warmth in her tone, only a chilling formality. Frank, still seething, stood guard by the door, a silent, smug witness. Sarah sat, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, her heart hammering against her ribs. She braced herself. We have received a rather concerning report regarding your conduct today, Miss Reed continued, her fingers steepled precisely under her chin. Specifically, an incident involving a gentleman you brought onto hospital property, directly after an interaction you had with him off-site. He was in severe medical distress, Miss Reed, Sarah interjected, trying to keep her voice steady. He had all the signs of heat stroke and severe dehydration. No one else was helping him. I couldn't just leave him there. Miss Reed's smile remained fixed, but her eyes hardened. Nurse Jenkins, I understand your emotions. We all want to help, but as a professional at Clarity Health, your first duty is to this institution. Your actions today exposed this hospital to catastrophic liability. Liability? Sarah echoed, incredulous. A man was dying. Let's explore that, shall we? Reed leaned forward slightly, her voice dropping to a dangerously calm level. You encountered an unknown individual. You offered him unvetted water from your personal supply. What if that water had been contaminated? What if you had been attacked by this individual? What if he had a communicable disease? Do you understand the chain of events you could have triggered? The lawsuits, the public health crisis, the damage to our reputation? Sarah stared at her, dumbfounded. He was dehydrated! He needed water! It was an act of basic human decency. Human decency, Nurse Jenkins, Reed said, her tone dripping with condescension, is a noble sentiment, but it must be tempered by professional conduct and adherence to protocol. Our protocols are designed to protect our staff, our patients, and this institution. By violating them, you jeopardized all three. He's a veteran, Miss Reed, Sarah argued, trying a different tack. He served this country. His service, while commendable, does not exempt him from our intake procedures or our financial policies, Reed countered, her voice unwavering. Nor does it excuse your decision to bypass every established safeguard. You bypassed triage, you bypassed security, and you bypassed common sense. She paused, letting the words hang in the air. Furthermore, you openly defied a direct order from our head of security, Frank Higgins, to not bring this individual onto hospital property. Frank nodded grimly, confirming the accusation. Sarah felt a surge of hot, indignant anger. They were twisting everything, turning her compassion into recklessness, her professionalism into insubordination. I was doing my job, my actual job, which is to care for the sick and injured. Your job, Miss Reed stated with chilling clarity, is to provide care within the framework and policies established by Clarity Health Medical Center. Not to act as a rogue agent, making unilateral decisions that put this entire organization at risk. Do you understand the message this sends to other staff? That they can ignore policies whenever they feel like it? That they can invite any random person off the street into our sterile environment? The conversation was a masterclass in corporate gaslighting. Every one of Sarah's points was countered with an unassailable wall of policy, liability, and institutional self-preservation. Reed had an answer for everything, always reframing the hospital as the potential victim of Sarah's poor judgment. Given the severity of your actions, Nurse Jenkins, Miss Reed concluded, her face utterly devoid of emotion, and your demonstrated disregard for Clarity Health's operational procedures, we have no choice but to place you on immediate, unpaid administrative leave, pending a full review by the board. This review will determine the future of your employment and, potentially, your nursing license. You are not to speak to any staff regarding this matter. You are to surrender your ID badge and any hospital property. Frank will escort you out. Sarah felt the world tilt. Unpaid leave, review, losing her license. It was a death sentence for her career, all for giving a dying man a bottle of water. "This is insane," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "You're punishing me for saving a life." Miss Reed merely offered a tight, pitying smile. "Nurse Jenkins, we are protecting our assets. Something you seem to have forgotten to do today." Frank, with a smug, triumphant look, stepped forward. "If you'll come with me, Nurse Jenkins." He practically relished the moment, ushering her towards the door. As Sarah walked out of the office, the plush carpet felt like quicksand. The sterile air, once a comfort, now felt like a suffocating shroud. She was escorted out of the building, past colleagues who averted their eyes, past the very ER where she had dedicated years of her life. The humiliation burned, a searing brand on her soul. She had been cast out, not for failure, but for an act of pure, unadulterated human kindness. The next 24 hours were a blur of anxiety, punctuated by moments of soul-crushing despair. Sarah's small apartment, usually a haven of quiet comfort after her chaotic shifts, now felt like a prison. Every muted ding from her phone sent a jolt of terror through her, expecting a formal dismissal letter, or worse, notification from the State Board of Nursing. She paced. Saturday. She stared blankly at the TV. Her mind was a relentless loop of the confrontation with Miss Reed, each sterile, corporate phrase twisting the knife deeper. Catastrophic liability. Compromising assets. Rogue agent. She replayed the scene at the bus stop, the veteran's parched lips, the desperate gulp of water. Had she been wrong? Had she, in her naive idealism, thrown away everything she had worked for? The insidious doubt, planted so skillfully by Miss Reed, began to take root. She tried to reach out. She called a couple of nurses she considered friends, colleagues she had shared countless late-night shifts and difficult cases with. The first, Maria, answered with a strained cheerfulness. "Hey, Sarah, what's up?" When Sarah hesitantly explained what had happened, recounting the injustice and her suspension, Maria's voice grew guarded. "Oh, wow, that's big. Look, Sarah, I totally get it, but policies are policies. And Miss Reed, she doesn't play around. I really can't get involved. You know how at Island? My kids, my mortgage," the excuses tumbled out, thinly veiled and entirely self-serving. "Just lay low, okay? Don't make waves." The call ended with a hurried goodbye, leaving Sarah feeling colder than before. The second call, to Ben, an older male nurse who often joked about being too cynical for Clarity Health, yielded a similar result. "Jenkins, look, I'm with you in spirit, okay? But you went against the machine. The machine always wins. You pushed too hard. What did you expect?" He offered no comfort, only a pragmatic fatalism that stung more than outright rejection. "Just try to survive the board review, man. Say you learned your lesson. Beg for your job back. That's the only way." Each call hammered home the crushing truth. The system had successfully isolated her. No one would stand with her. They were all too afraid, too invested in their own survival within Clarity Health's unforgiving hierarchy. The weight of her solitude pressed down on her, an oppressive blanket. Her thoughts kept returning to Elias. What was happening to him? Was he still in that hallway, an afterthought in a system that valued paperwork over people? The anxiety gnawed at her, a physical ache in her stomach. She couldn't just abandon him after her act of defiance. Gathering what little courage she had left, Sarah decided she had to follow up. She called the hospital's main line, navigating the automated directory until she reached the ER reception. "Clarity Health ER, how can I help you?" A cheerful but robotic voice answered. "Hi, this is Sarah Jenkins," she said, trying to sound authoritative, as if she still had any. "I'm a nurse there. I'm calling to check on a patient, Elias Vance. He was admitted yesterday, severe dehydration." There was a pause, then the voice hardened. "I'm sorry, Miss Jenkins, but I show no active employment for a Sarah Jenkins. Furthermore, due to HIPAA regulations, I cannot provide patient information to unauthorized individuals. But I admitted him, Sarah protested, her voice rising in frustration. I'm on administrative leave, not fired. I'm still a nurse. I cannot confirm or deny any patient's presence, nor can I discuss patient information with you, Miss Jenkins, the voice repeated, a pre-programmed brick wall. Have a good day. The line went dead. Sarah slammed her phone down, a scream of frustration building in her chest. HIPAA. The very regulations designed to protect patients were now being weaponized against her, used to deny her information about a man whose life she had tried to save. She couldn't sit still anymore. She had to see for herself. She had to know, despite Miss Reed's explicit order to stay away, despite Frank's smug threats. Sarah got in her car and drove back to Clarity Health Medical Center. The familiar facade seemed to mock her, its polished glass glinting in the afternoon sunday. She parked her Honda in the furthest corner of the employee lot, hoping to avoid immediate detection, and approached the ER entrance. Her heart was pounding, a frantic drum against her ribs. Just as she reached the automatic doors, a figure stepped out from behind a pillar, blocking her path. It was Frank. He had been waiting. His face was set in a triumphant smirk, his eyes glinting with malicious satisfaction. Well, 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 he drawled, hands on his hips. If it isn't Nurse Jenkins, didn't Miss Reed make it clear you're not allowed on hospital property? I just want to check on Mr. Vance, Sarah said, trying to push past him. I just want to know he's okay. Frank put a hand on her shoulder, his grip firm and deliberately intimidating. You're trespassing, Jenkins. I already filed a report yesterday. If you don't leave this property right now, I'm calling the police. This is a direct violation of your administrative leave. You can't do this, Frank, Sarah cried, her voice cracking with desperation. He's a patient. He needs help. He's our patient, Frank retorted, emphasizing our with a sneer. And you're not one of us anymore. Now move. Sarah stood her ground, tears stinging her eyes. I'm not leaving until I know he's getting proper care. Frank's smirk widened. He pulled out his radio. Dispatch, I have a trespasser at the ER entrance. Former employee refusing to leave. Requesting units. Within minutes, 2 police cruisers pulled up, sirens silent but lights flashing, casting an ominous red and blue glow on the pristine hospital entrance. 2 officers, a man and a woman, emerged from their vehicles, their expressions professional but unyielding. Everything all right here, sir? The male officer asked Frank, who puffed out his chest. No, officer, Frank said, gesturing to Sarah. This woman, Sarah Jenkins, has been placed on administrative leave by the hospital. She was explicitly told to stay off the property. She's been verbally warned, but she's refusing to leave. The female officer turned to Sarah. Ma'am, is this true? Are you on leave from this hospital? Sarah swallowed hard. Yes, officer, but I just want to check on a patient. I'm a nurse and I'm worried about him. She tried to explain the situation, the heat stroke, the lack of care, Miss Reed's overzealous punishment. The officers listened patiently, their faces impassive. When she finished, the male officer sighed. Ma'am, I understand your concern, and it sounds like you were trying to do a good thing. But this is private property. The hospital has the right to refuse you entry, especially if you're on leave. And if they want you removed, we have to enforce that. But he's a veteran, Sarah pleaded, desperation rising. They're neglecting him. They're letting him lie in a hallway because he doesn't have insurance. The female officer's expression softened slightly, a flicker of sympathy in her eyes. We hear you, ma'am, and we appreciate your compassion. But we can't intervene in hospital policy or patient care decisions. Our job right now is to ensure the peace and enforce the property owner's wishes. She paused. I'm going to have to ask you one last time to leave the property. If you refuse, we'll have to issue you a citation for trespassing. Sarah looked from the officers to Frank, whose smirk was now a full-blown grin of triumph. She looked at the gleaming doors of Clarity Health, which suddenly seemed to mock her with their cold, unwelcoming facade. She was beaten. Utterly, completely beaten. The system had won. With a heavy heart and tears blurring her vision, Sarah turned and slowly walked back to her car. Each step felt like a capitulation, a surrender to the callous indifference of an institution that prioritized profit and policy over human life. She was defeated, humiliated, and utterly alone. The lowest point had been reached. Back inside Clarity Health, the gurney in the hallway continued its silent vigil. Elias Vance, labeled as John Doe, homeless, was barely conscious, drifting in and out of a shallow sleep induced by the saline drip and sheer exhaustion. His vitals were slowly stabilizing, but he was still weak, his body still recovering from the brutal assault of the heat. He was just another number in the ER, an inconvenient presence that the staff mostly ignored. But not everyone. A young, compassionate nurse's aide named Chloe, barely out of nursing school, had been working a double shift and was tasked with making rounds to check on the low-priority patients. Chloe had witnessed the initial exchange between Sarah and Frank, and later heard the hushed whispers about Jenkins getting fired for a homeless man. Her youthful idealism, unlike Sarah's, hadn't been entirely extinguished yet. She felt a deep, simmering injustice at the way Sarah had been treated, and by extension, the way Elias was being treated. Chloe approached Elias's gurney, her heart heavy. She adjusted his blanket, which had slipped down, and gently checked his IV. His eyes fluttered open, still a startling blue, though now tinged with a weariness that seemed to settle into his very bones. "How are you feeling, sir?" Chloe asked softly, a genuine kindness in her voice that was rare in this ER. Elias coughed, a dry, rattling sound. "Better, I think. Where's the nurse? The one who gave me water?" His voice was raspy, but clearer than before. Chloe hesitated, then decided to bend the rules a little. "She's not here right now, sir, but she really cared about you." Elias nodded slowly, a flicker of something that looked like regret in his eyes. He reached a trembling hand towards his chest, clutching a worn, tarnished dog tag that hung from a thin chain beneath his tattered shirt. My wallet," he rasped. "In my pants. Can you get it?" Chloe, mindful of hospital rules about patient belongings, still felt a tug of empathy. She carefully retrieved his pants, which had been tossed unceremoniously into a plastic bag under his gurney. She found a worn leather wallet, its contents thin. Inside, besides the faded military ID, was a single, laminated card. It was old, creased, and bore a curious, cryptic message. "In case of emergency, activate the ghosts." Below that, a single phone number was handwritten in faded ink. Chloe stared at the card. Activate the ghosts? It sounded like something out of a spy novel, but there was an urgency in Elias's request, a hidden weight to the card. Her gut told her this wasn't just some random number. It felt important. And after seeing how the hospital had treated both Sarah and Elias, a rebellious thought sparked in her mind. What if the ghosts could actually help? Against her better judgment, and certainly against hospital policy, Chloe pulled out her personal cell phone. She slipped into the supply closet, her heart hammering, and punched in the number. It rang once, twice, then a gruff, laconic voice answered. "Yeah?" "Hi," Chloe whispered, her voice trembling. "My name is Chloe. I'm a nurse's aide at Clarity Health Medical Center. I have a patient here, Elias Vance. He's suffering from severe heat stroke and dehydration. He gave me this number." The card says activate the ghosts. There was a moment of silence on the other end, so absolute it made Chloe wonder if the call had dropped. Then, the voice, now sharper, more intense, replied, "Repeat the name, Elias Vance. Are you sure?" "Yes, sir," Chloe confirmed, her voice gaining a little confidence. "He's got a military ID, Master Sergeant Elias Vance." "Understood," the voice said, the gruffness replaced by a steely resolve. "Where exactly are you, and what's his condition?" Chloe quickly relayed the hospital's address and Elias's current status, including the John Doe homeless designation and the minimal care he was receiving. She even briefly, and cautiously, mentioned the nurse who had been suspended for helping him. "Thank you, Chloe," the voice said. "Stay with him if you can. We're on our way. And don't worry about that nurse. We'll take care of it." The line clicked dead. Chloe stood in the supply closet, her heart still racing, but a strange sense of anticipation, almost exhilaration, settling over her. She had done something rebellious, something risky, but she had a feeling it was the right thing to do. A few hours later, as the late afternoon sun began its slow descent, 4 men entered the pristine, hushed lobby of Clarity Health Medical Center. They were a study in contrast to the usual hospital visitors. All were in their late 50s or early 60s, their hair mostly gray or thinning, their faces etched with lines that spoke of experience, not age. They wore no uniforms, no distinguishing insignia, just plain clothes, well-fitting jeans, tactical boots, and subdued shirts. Yet, there was an unmistakable aura about them. They moved with a quiet, synchronized purpose, a contained power that subtly shifted the energy of the room. People instinctively got out of their way, sensing something unusual, something formidable. They were led by Jake Raptor Simmons, a man with piercing gray eyes that missed nothing, and a stoic demeanor that radiated calm authority. He approached the main reception desk, where the perpetually harried receptionist, Gloria, was battling a tangled phone cord. "Excuse me," Jake said, his voice low but clear, cutting through the lobby's muted chatter. "We're here to see Elias Vance." Gloria looked up, startled. She scanned their faces, then her computer screen. "Elias Vance? I don't see an Elias Vance admitted here. Are you sure you have the right hospital?" One of the other men, a broad-shouldered individual with a kind face but unyielding gaze, stepped forward. "He might be listed under John Doe," he suggested, his voice equally calm, equally commanding. "Possibly John Doe, homeless." Gloria's eyes widened slightly. "Oh, that John Doe. Yes, he's in the ER hallway, but visitors aren't usually permitted in the ER without prior arrangement." "We have an arrangement," Jake stated, his eyes locking onto Gloria's. There was no menace in his tone, only an absolute certainty that brooked no argument. "We need to see him now." Gloria, flustered by their quiet intensity, felt an irrational fear prickle at the back of her neck. These were not men to argue with. She quickly made a call to the ER. The communication was brief, hushed. They're going down to the ER, Gloria stammered into the phone, her eyes still on the four men. "They say they're here for Elias Vance, and they're very insistent." The phone call set off an alarm bell somewhere deep within the hospital's administrative bowels. Miss Reed, still basking in the glow of her efficient handling of the Jenkins problem, was immediately alerted to the unusual visitors demanding to see the John Doe. A cold knot formed in her stomach. This was not supposed to happen. Her problems were supposed to be contained. She stood from her desk, straightened her jacket, and with Frank Higgins trailing like a loyal hound, made her way to the lobby, ready to deploy her corporate speak and assert Clarity Health's authority. She had no idea that she was walking directly into a storm that had been brewing for decades, a storm of loyalty, justice, and the unwavering bond of brothers. Miss Reed descended to the lobby, her polished heels clicking with precise rhythm on the marble floor. Her face was set in a professional, unyielding mask, ready to deploy her usual tactics of bureaucratic deflection. Frank, bristling with an unjustified sense of power, strutted beside her, eager to confront another problem. As they reached the lobby, they saw the group of men, still standing with that unsettling, quiet authority. Jake's gray eyes met Miss Reed's, and for a fleeting moment, she felt a shiver of unease. There was something in his gaze that was utterly unreadable, yet powerfully self-assured, unlike any visitor she had ever encountered. "I am Miss Evelyn Reed, hospital administrator," she announced, her voice precise, a practiced blend of authority and polite dismissal. "I understand you're here to see a patient. May I ask who you are?" Jake Simmons took a step forward, his posture relaxed, yet radiating an unspoken power. "Jake Simmons, and these are my brothers, Marcus, David, and Ben. We're here for Master Sergeant Elias Vance." Miss Reed's eyebrow quirked, a flicker of irritation. "Master Sergeant? I believe there's been a misunderstanding. We have a John Doe who was brought in yesterday, suffering from heat stroke. We don't have anyone by that name." "You do now," Jake said, his voice calm, but with an edge of steel. "Elias Vance, Master Sergeant, U.S. Army Special Forces, retired. Distinguished Service Cross recipient. That's who you have in your care." The air in the lobby seemed to thicken. The other visitors, sensing the shift in dynamics, began to discreetly pay more attention. Miss Reed's perfectly composed facade wavered for a second. Distinguished Service Cross. This wasn't some random transient. This was big. "Well, Mr. Simmons?" Reed quickly regained her composure, though a hint of uncertainty crept into her voice. "Regardless of the patient's background, he is currently receiving care according to our established protocols. If you'd like to discuss his condition, you'll need to speak with the attending physician and adhere to visiting hours." "We'll be discussing his condition with his attending physician, all right?" Marcus, one of Jake's companions, interjected, his voice surprisingly gentle but with an underlying current of menace. "And we'll be discussing the protocols that allowed a decorated American hero to be left for dead in the street, then neglected in your hallway, Miss Reed." Reed blanched. "Neglected? That's an outrageous accusation. He was brought in with no identification, no insurance. He's been given a saline drip. He's stable." "Stable, yes," David, another of the team, said, his voice a low rumble. "Stable enough to lie in a hallway for nearly a day. Stable enough to have his military ID ignored. Stable enough to be listed as homeless when he has family, a home, and a lifetime of service. Jake held up a hand, silencing his teammates. He turned back to Reed, his gaze unwavering. We've already been contacted by a very concerned young aide. We know the story. We know he was left to suffer. And we know that the only person who showed him an ounce of compassion, Nurse Sarah Jenkins, was suspended and threatened for it. Where is she? Reed's face drained of color. The name, spoken with such quiet authority, hit her like a physical blow. The Jenkins problem was not only back, it was now amplified by an order of magnitude. Nurse Jenkins' employment status is an internal matter, Mr. Simmons, and quite frankly, it's irrelevant to this patient's care. Oh, it's very relevant, Miss Reed, Jake corrected her, his voice still calm, but now with a glacial quality. Because it highlights a fundamental flaw in your protocols. A flaw that prioritizes paperwork over people, profit over compassion, and policy over patriotism. We want to see his chart. And we want to speak with Dr. Evans, the attending physician. Reed, cornered, felt her corporate power beginning to slip. She hated it. She hated losing control. Very well, she said, through gritted teeth. Frank, go get Dr. Evans. And bring Mr. Vance's chart. A few minutes later, the perpetually annoyed Dr. Evans arrived, shuffling in, looking distinctly uncomfortable under the focused gaze of the four men. He tried to bluster, to talk down to them as he did to most people. Gentlemen, I understand your concern, but the patient, John Doe, is responding to treatment. We've given him a saline drip. Dr. Evans? Jake interrupted, his voice cutting through the doctor's excuses like a scalpel. My name is Jake Simmons. I'm a former Army medic. My teammates here also have extensive medical training. We've had a preliminary report. We'd like to see the full chart now. Frank, who had retrieved the chart, handed it over reluctantly. Jake opened it, his eyes scanning the pages with surprising speed and precision. His teammates gathered around, their expressions growing grimmer with each page. So, Jake began, his voice dangerously soft. You noted severe dehydration, but no comprehensive electrolyte panel, no cardiac enzymes, despite a patient with potential heat stress and pre-existing conditions indicated in his old service records. You have John Doe, homeless, prominently displayed, despite his military ID clearly stating his name and rank. And you noted only basic rehydration for a man who, by all accounts, was near death on your doorstep. He looked up, his gray eyes piercing. Does this qualify as standard of care for Clarity Health, Dr. Evans? Or is it simply standard of care for an uninsured veteran you clearly deemed unworthy of your time? Dr. Evans sputtered, his face reddening. I followed protocol. We are a private hospital. We have limited resources. Limited resources? Marcus scoffed. You seem to have plenty for your administrator's salaries and your fancy lobby, but not for a man who defended your right to operate this private hospital in the first place. At this point, another of the men, Ben, pulled out a phone and put it on speaker. Miss Reed, Dr. Evans! A calm, authoritative female voice filled the lobby. My name is Attorney Catherine Vance. I represent Master Sergeant Elias Vance. I'm currently in contact with the Department of Veterans Affairs and several federal agencies. We have a compelling case for gross negligence, violation of the Emergency Medical Treatment and Labor Act, EMTALA, and potential discrimination against a veteran receiving federal funding. Clarity Health Medical Center receives substantial federal grants, correct? Funds that are contingent on adhering to non-discriminatory care for all patients, including veterans. Your treatment of Master Sergeant Vance and the suspension of a nurse for attempting to provide humane care suggests a pattern of behavior that could jeopardize all of that. Miss Reed and Dr. Evans exchanged a horrified look. The words federal funding and EMTALA were like a cold bucket of water. This was no longer a minor HR issue or an inconvenient patient. This was a full-blown PR and legal catastrophe, spiraling out of control with terrifying speed. This is outrageous, Miss Reed stammered, trying to regain her footing. We operate within the law. Nurse Jenkins was suspended for insubordination for violating policy. Policy that led to a combat veteran being treated like refuse, Jake countered, his voice rising, for the first time with a hint of controlled fury. A combat veteran who incidentally has quite a story to tell. A story that I'm sure the local news and every veterans advocacy group in the country would be very interested in hearing, especially the part about the nurse who tried to help him and was punished for it. He looked directly at Miss Reed, his eyes radiating a silent, formidable challenge. We asked you where Nurse Jenkins was. You dismissed her as irrelevant. But it sounds like she was the only one in this entire institution who honored the oath you're supposed to live by. She's the hero here, Miss Reed. Not you, not Dr. Evans, and certainly not your policies. Then, the final, crushing blow, Jake pulled out his own phone. I believe your head of security, Frank Higgins, also called the police on Nurse Jenkins when she tried to check on Master Sergeant Vance, and prevented her from entering the property. Correct? He looked at Frank, whose smug expression had vanished, replaced by open fear. Frank mumbled something incoherent. We have copies of the police report, Jake continued, his voice resonating through the suddenly silent lobby. Attempted trespass. Against a nurse who only wanted to ensure a patient's well-being. Miss Reed, Dr. Evans, Frank, you have made a very powerful enemy today, an enemy that has a long memory and even longer reach. At that moment, as the realization of their absolute defeat settled heavily on Miss Reed and Dr. Evans, one of Jake's men nodded towards the entrance. Speaking of that hero, he murmured, looks like she's here. Sarah Jenkins walked through the automatic doors, a hospital employee ushering her in with an apologetic, almost reverent air. She had been found by one of Jake's team, informed of the situation, and asked to come back. She was still wearing the same clothes from yesterday, her hair slightly disheveled, her eyes tired but now alight with a hesitant hope. She walked into the lobby, and the sight that greeted her made her stop dead in her tracks. Miss Reed and Dr. Evans, pale and sweating, were being systematically dismantled by Jake and his formidable team. The air was thick with the scent of shattered authority and imminent downfall. Her eyes met Jake's. He gave her a slow, deliberate nod, a nod of profound respect, of vindication, of recognition. In that moment, the isolation, the despair, the humiliation of the past 24 hours dissolved. The audience's rage, which had been simmering for 3 long sections, found its complete, visceral release. The silent cheer that erupted in Sarah's heart was deafening. The system had pushed back, but now, a force far more powerful had arrived to push back harder. The aftermath at Clarity Health Medical Center was swift and brutal. Within an hour of the confrontation in the lobby, the hospital's board of directors, now fully aware of the public relations, nightmare, and federal litigation threat, went into damage control overdrive. Elias Vance was removed from the ER hallway with an almost comical urgency. Jake and his team had already arranged for his transfer. A sleek, state-of-the-art private medical transport, complete with a specialized care team, arrived to take him to the top-tier VA hospital in Palo Alto, California, a facility specifically chosen for its excellent veteran care and privacy. As Elias was gently wheeled out, his eyes found Sarah's. He gave her a weak but genuine smile, a silent thank you that resonated deeper than any words. Back inside, Miss Reed and Dr. Evans were immediately suspended, pending an internal investigation. Their faces were ghost white, their corporate composure utterly shattered. Frank Higgins, the security guard, who had delighted in Sarah's humiliation, was stripped of his uniform and fired on the spot. He stared at Jake, his face a mixture of fear and disbelief, before being escorted out by new security personnel. The speed and decisiveness of the actions were a stark testament to the power of the ghosts and the legal firepower they brought to bear. The hospital board issued a press release that evening, a masterpiece of carefully worded corporate doublespeak. It praised their long-standing commitment to veteran care, announced sweeping policy reviews, and expressed deep regret for any perceived shortcomings in patient service. It conspicuously failed to mention Sarah Jenkins by name or the John Doe designation. A few days later, Sarah received an official letter from Clarity Health. It was profusely apologetic, acknowledging her unwavering commitment to patient well-being. It offered her full reinstatement as an ER nurse, a significant promotion to Nurse Manager of Patient Advocacy, a substantial raise, and full back pay for her administrative leave. It even included an offer to cover her legal fees if she desired. The hospital was desperately trying to buy her silence and goodwill. Sarah held the letter in her hands, weighing her options. The promotion, the raise, it was everything she had once dreamed of. But as she reread the carefully crafted words, she saw through the hollow gestures. The core of Clarity Health hadn't changed. It was still a cold, profit-driven machine, simply trying to patch a PR hole. Could she truly go back to that environment, knowing what she knew, seeing what she had seen? She looked out her window at the vibrant Phoenix sunset, a swirl of oranges and purples painting the sky. No. Her values, her calling, were too important to be compromised by an institution that only pretended to care. With a firm resolve, she penned a polite but definitive letter of resignation. She had found her courage again, and she wasn't going to squander it. A week later, Sarah found herself at a quiet, unassuming cafe, far from the gleaming towers of Clarity Health. Across from her sat Jake Simmons, his gray eyes now holding a hint of warmth, and a surprisingly spry Elias Vance, his face fuller, his eyes clear and bright. "Nurse Jenkins," Elias began, his voice strong. "I owe you everything. You saved my life. And you stood up for what was right when no one else would." "It was just water, sir," Sarah said, a blush rising to her cheeks. "It was more than water," Jake interjected. "It was humanity. And that's a rare commodity these days, especially in places like Clarity Health." He leaned forward, a serious expression on his face. "Elias and I, we've been talking. We and the team, the Ghosts. We're establishing a nonprofit, the Vanguard Initiative. Our mission is to ensure no veteran falls through the cracks again. We're talking legal aid, medical advocacy, housing assistance, mental health support. We're going to build a system that actually helps, not just talks about it." Sarah listened, her heart quickening. This was it. This was what she had always wanted to do, but had felt powerless to achieve within the confines of a corporate hospital. "We need someone to run the medical advocacy side," Jake continued, his gaze direct. "Someone with real-world experience, a fierce heart, and a backbone of steel. Someone who isn't afraid to fight for what's right, even when the system fights back. Someone like you, Sarah." Elias nodded. "We need your compassion, your knowledge, your fire. You wouldn't be a cog in a machine anymore. You'd be building the machine, Sarah, a machine for good." They offered her a lead role as a patient advocate and medical coordinator, with a salary that was nearly double what Clarity Health had begrudgingly offered. More importantly, they offered her a purpose, a chance to truly make a difference, unburdened by corporate greed or bureaucratic indifference. Sarah didn't hesitate. "I'm in," she said, a wide, genuine smile breaking across her face for the first time in days. Months later, Sarah Jenkins, no longer just a nurse but a force of nature, was on the road. Her new office was her laptop, her phone, and the front seat of her now reliable SUV. She was in a small, dusty town in rural Arizona, navigating a labyrinth of federal agencies and local clinics, advocating for a 70-year-old Vietnam veteran who had been denied his much-needed physical therapy. She argued passionately with a flustered VA administrator over the phone, citing regulations and patient rights with newfound confidence. She visited the veteran in his humble home, listening to his story with genuine empathy, meticulously documenting his needs. She was still fighting the system, but now she had an entire ghost team and the formidable attorney Vance backing her every move. The fight was no longer a lonely, desperate struggle. It was a coordinated, powerful campaign for justice. As she drove away, the desert landscape stretching endlessly before her, Sarah felt a profound sense of peace and purpose. The sun, once an enemy, now bathed the land in a warm, golden glow. She was no longer just a nurse. She was an advocate, a champion, a true healer in a world that desperately needed more of them. She was a vital part of a loyal family, a community built on courage, compassion, and the unwavering belief that no one, especially not those who had sacrificed so much, should ever be left behind. She had given her only water to a veteran, and in doing so, she had found her own wellspring.